The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Ravencrest Palace as Queen Consort Cordelia paced frantically in her private chambers. Her silk gown rustled with each agitated step, the sound echoing off the ornate walls adorned with centuries-old portraits of monarchs past. The coffee cup in her trembling hands rattled against its saucer, betraying the fury that coursed through her veins. Lady Margaret, her most trusted advisor and confidant, stood near the window overlooking the palace gardens. She had served the royal family for over 3 decades and had never witnessed such raw emotion from any member of the nobility. The tension in the room was suffocating. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should consider a more measured approach," Margaret ventured carefully, her voice barely above a whisper. She had learned long ago that timing was everything when dealing with royal temperaments. Cordelia whipped around, her emerald eyes blazing with indignation. "Measured? Margaret, that woman has gone too far this time. Princess Catherine thinks she can manipulate the press, turn the public against me, and get away with it." Her voice rose with each word, causing the ornamental birds in their gilded cage to flutter nervously. The feud between Queen Consort Cordelia and Princess Catherine had been simmering for months, ever since King Edmund's coronation. Catherine, beloved by the people for her charitable work and natural grace, had inadvertently overshadowed Cordelia during several public engagements. The press had been particularly cruel, often comparing the two women and questioning Cordelia's suitability for her new role. The breaking point had come 3 days earlier during the annual Children's Hospital Gala. Princess Catherine had arrived wearing a stunning sapphire gown that perfectly complemented her auburn hair and porcelain complexion. The photographers had swarmed her, capturing every smile and gesture as she interacted with the young patients. Meanwhile, Cordelia, dressed in what she thought was an equally elegant emerald ensemble, had been largely ignored by both the media and the guests. But it was Catherine's impromptu speech that had sent Cordelia over the edge. Speaking without notes, Catherine had eloquently addressed the importance of genuine compassion in royal duties, emphasizing how authentic connections with the people were more valuable than grand gestures or expensive ceremonies. The audience had erupted in applause, and social media had exploded with praise for the princess's heartfelt words. Cordelia had interpreted the speech as a direct attack on her character and leadership style. In her mind, Catherine had deliberately chosen those words to undermine her authority and question her commitment to the crown. She stood there, Margaret, speaking as if she were already queen. Cordelia continued, setting down her coffee with enough force to slosh the liquid onto the antique side table. The way people looked at her, the way they hung on every word. It was a calculated performance designed to humiliate me. Margaret dabbed at the spilled coffee with her handkerchief, choosing her words carefully. "Your Majesty, Princess Catherine has always been popular with the public. Perhaps this is simply a matter of different approaches to royal duties rather than deliberate sabotage." Cordelia's laugh was bitter and sharp. "Different approaches? She's systematically working to turn the kingdom against me. Look at this morning's headlines." She gestured toward a stack of newspapers on her desk, their front pages featuring glamorous photos of Catherine alongside unflattering images of herself. The headlines were indeed harsh. "People's princess shines while queen struggles," read one. Another proclaimed, "Catherine's grace highlights palace tensions." The tabloids were even more brutal, with one featuring a side-by-side comparison titled "Real Royalty versus Pretender." Margaret glanced at the papers and felt a pang of sympathy for her mistress. The press could be merciless, and public opinion was a fickle beast. However, she also recognized that Cordelia's reaction was becoming increasingly irrational. "Your Majesty," Margaret said gently, "perhaps if we focused on Your Majesty's own charitable initiatives and public appearances, we could shift the narrative in a more positive direction." But Cordelia was beyond reasonable discourse. Her mind had already moved to more drastic measures. She had spent a sleepless night devising a plan that would eliminate what she saw as the threat to her position and reputation. "No, Margaret, this requires decisive action. Catherine has crossed a line, and there must be consequences. Cordelia moved to her ornate writing desk and pulled out a piece of official palace stationery. I'm going to file formal charges against her. Margaret's face went pale. Charges, Your Majesty? What charges could possibly be brought against Princess Catherine? Cordelia's smile was cold and calculating. Treason, Margaret. High treason against the crown. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Margaret felt the blood drain from her face as the implications of such an accusation sank in. Treason was not merely a criminal charge. It was a declaration of war within the royal family itself. Your Majesty, treason is an incredibly serious allegation. It requires substantial evidence and carries severe penalties, including potential imprisonment or exile. Are you certain this is the path you wish to pursue? Cordelia was already drafting her formal complaint, her pen moving swiftly across the paper. She has deliberately undermined my authority, questioned my fitness to serve, and attempted to turn the subjects of this kingdom against their rightful queen. If that isn't treason, then the word has no meaning. Margaret watched in horror as Cordelia outlined her case. The queen consort claimed that Catherine's public speeches contained coded language designed to incite rebellion against the crown. She argued that the princess's charitable work was actually a cover for building a network of supporters who could be mobilized against the monarchy. Most damning of all, she alleged that Catherine was secretly meeting with foreign dignitaries to discuss potential regime change. None of these accusations had any basis in reality, but Cordelia had convinced herself they were true. Her paranoia and jealousy had transformed innocent actions into treasonous plots. Your Majesty, these allegations will require investigation by the Royal Guard and potentially the kingdom's intelligence services. Are you prepared for the scrutiny this will bring to the palace? Cordelia looked up from her writing, her expression fierce with determination. Let them investigate. When they discover the truth about Catherine's activities, the kingdom will finally see her for what she really is. As Cordelia continued writing, Margaret quietly excused herself and hurried toward the east wing of the palace where Prince William maintained his offices. If anyone could prevent this catastrophe, it would be Catherine's husband. The prince was known for his diplomatic skills and level-headed approach to family conflicts. The corridors of Ravencrest Palace seemed endless as Margaret rushed through them, her mind racing with the implications of what she had just witnessed. Servants and courtiers stepped aside respectfully as she passed, but she barely acknowledged them. Time was of the essence. Prince William's private secretary, Lord Harrison, was reviewing the day's schedule when Margaret burst into the outer office without ceremony. I must speak with His Royal Highness immediately, she announced, her usual composure completely shattered. Lord Harrison looked up in surprise. Lady Margaret was known throughout the palace for her impeccable manners and respect for protocol. To see her in such a state was deeply alarming. Lady Margaret, His Royal Highness, is currently in conference with the Minister of Agriculture regarding the spring planting initiatives. Perhaps I could schedule an appointment for later this afternoon. No, Margaret replied firmly. This cannot wait. Please inform His Royal Highness that there is an urgent family matter requiring his immediate attention. Something in her tone convinced Lord Harrison that this was not a request that could be delayed. He knocked gently on the prince's door and entered the inner office. Within moments, he emerged and gestured for Margaret to enter. Prince William was seated behind a massive oak desk, reviewing documents related to sustainable farming practices. At 32, he possessed the classic features of his royal lineage, but with a warmth and approachability that endeared him to both his subjects and his family. His dark hair was slightly tousled from running his hands through it, a habit he had developed when concentrating on complex problems. Lady Margaret, he said, rising to greet her. Lord Harrison mentioned this was urgent. Is everything all right? Margaret took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to say would shatter the relative peace of the morning. Your Royal Highness, I'm afraid Queen Consort Cordelia is preparing to file formal charges of high treason against Princess Catherine. The color drained from William's face as the words registered. He sank back into his chair, his mind struggling to process the enormity of what he had just heard. Treason? Margaret, That's impossible. Catherine would never. What evidence could Cordelia possibly have? Margaret quickly recounted the morning's events, describing Cordelia's paranoid interpretations of Catherine's recent public appearances and her determination to see the princess arrested. She watched as William's expression shifted from disbelief to concern to barely controlled anger. "This is madness," William said finally, his voice tight with emotion. "Catherine has done nothing but serve this kingdom with honor and dignity. Her only crime is being good at her job." Margaret nodded gravely. "I fear Queen Consort Cordelia's judgment has been clouded by jealousy and insecurity. She truly believes Princess Catherine is plotting against her." William stood and began pacing behind his desk, much as Cordelia had done in her chambers. The irony was not lost on Margaret that both members of the royal family were responding to stress in remarkably similar ways. "Have the formal charges been filed yet?" William asked. "I believe Her Majesty was still drafting the documents when I left her chambers. However, she seemed determined to proceed with all haste." William moved to his window, gazing out at the gardens where Catherine often walked with their young daughter, Princess Sophia. The thought of his wife being arrested and imprisoned on false charges filled him with a cold fury he had never experienced before. "Margaret, I need you to return to Cordelia's chambers and find some way to delay the filing of these charges. Tell her anything, that proper legal review is required, that the documents need royal seals, whatever you can think of. I need time to speak with my father." Margaret curtsied respectfully. "Of course, Your Royal Highness. How long do you need?" "Give me 2 hours," William replied. "And, Margaret, thank you for bringing this to my attention. Your loyalty to this family will not be forgotten." As Margaret hurried back toward Cordelia's chambers, William summoned his personal guard and instructed them to locate King Edmund immediately. The conversation he was about to have with his father would determine not only Catherine's fate, but potentially the future stability of the entire kingdom. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine was in the palace nursery, completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. She was reading fairy tales to 3-year-old Princess Sophia, her melodic voice bringing the stories to life as her daughter listened with rapt attention. The nursery was Catherine's favorite room in the palace, filled with warm sunlight and decorated with whimsical murals depicting scenes from classic children's literature. It was here that she felt most like herself, rather than a public figure carrying the weight of royal expectations. "Mama, read the one about the brave princess again," Sophia requested, her bright blue eyes sparkling with excitement. Catherine smiled and opened the book to the requested story. As she read about a princess who saved her kingdom through kindness and wisdom rather than force, she had no idea that her own story was about to take a dramatic and dangerous turn. #Royal Drama. Part 2. King Edmund was in his private study, reviewing state documents and correspondence from foreign dignitaries, when his son, Prince William, burst through the doors without ceremony. The king looked up with surprise, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. At 68, Edmund retained the commanding presence that had served him well throughout his 40-year reign, though recent years had added silver streaks to his dark hair and deepened the lines around his wise blue eyes. "William," he said, setting down his papers, "you look as though you've seen a ghost. What has happened?" William closed the door firmly behind him and approached his father's desk, his face grave with concern. "Father, we have a crisis developing within the family. Cordelia is preparing to file charges of high treason against Catherine." King Edmund removed his glasses slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Treason? That's a very serious accusation, William. What evidence does Cordelia believe she has against your wife?" William quickly recounted Lady Margaret's report, describing Cordelia's paranoid interpretations of Catherine's recent public appearances and charitable work. As he spoke, he watched his father's face grow increasingly troubled. "Father, Catherine has done nothing wrong. Her only offense is being naturally gifted at connecting with people and fulfilling her royal duties with genuine compassion. Cordelia has allowed jealousy to cloud her judgment to a dangerous degree." King Edmund rose from his chair and moved to the window overlooking the kingdom's capital city spread out below the palace. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the bustling streets where his subjects went about their daily lives, unaware of the drama unfolding within the palace walls. William, I must confess that I've been concerned about the growing tension between Cordelia and Catherine for some time. However, I had hoped it would resolve itself naturally as they both settled into their roles. William joined his father at the window. This goes far beyond normal adjustment difficulties, father. Cordelia is talking about having Catherine arrested and imprisoned. The political implications alone could destabilize the entire kingdom. The king nodded grimly. Indeed, if word of these charges reaches the public, it could cause irreparable damage to the monarchy's reputation. The people adore Catherine, and they would never accept such accusations without substantial proof. Proof that doesn't exist, William emphasized. Father, I need your help to stop this before it goes too far. King Edmund turned to face his son, his expression thoughtful. What exactly are you asking me to do, William? Intervene directly. As king, you have the authority to prevent these charges from being filed. You can order Cordelia to abandon this course of action. The king was quiet for several long moments, considering the delicate balance of family politics and royal protocol. William, while I do have that authority, using it could create an entirely different set of problems. Cordelia is the queen consort, and publicly overruling her could undermine her position and create lasting resentment. William's frustration was evident in his voice. Father, with respect, Cordelia's position means nothing if she destroys the monarchy with false accusations and paranoid conspiracies. Catherine's reputation, her freedom, and potentially her life are at stake. King Edmund returned to his desk and picked up his private phone. Lord Chancellor Montgomery, please come to my study immediately. We have an urgent legal matter to discuss. He hung up and looked at his son. William, we need to understand the full legal implications of what Cordelia is proposing before we decide on our response. Within minutes, Lord Chancellor Montgomery arrived at the king's study. A distinguished man in his 50s with prematurely gray hair and sharp, intelligent eyes, Montgomery had served as the kingdom's highest legal authority for over a decade. His expertise in royal law and constitutional matters was unparalleled. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, he said, bowing respectfully. How may I be of service? King Edmund gestured to a chair across from his desk. Montgomery, we need your guidance on a sensitive matter. If formal charges of high treason were to be filed against a member of the royal family, what would the legal process entail? Montgomery's eyebrows rose with surprise, but his professional demeanor remained intact. Your Majesty, charges of high treason against a royal family member would trigger a complex legal process. First, the accused would be taken into custody by the royal guard pending investigation. They would be held in the palace detention chambers, not the common prison, but their movements would be severely restricted. William felt his stomach clench at the thought of Catherine being imprisoned, even within the palace walls. Montgomery continued. Next, the Royal Intelligence Service would conduct a thorough investigation into the allegations. This could take weeks or even months, depending on the complexity of the charges. During this time, the accused would be unable to perform any royal duties or make public appearances. What about the public reaction? King Edmund asked. That's perhaps the most concerning aspect, Your Majesty. News of treason charges against a popular royal family member would almost certainly leak to the press. The public scrutiny and media attention would be unprecedented. If the charges are ultimately found to be baseless, the damage to both the accused and the accuser could be severe. William leaned forward in his chair. Montgomery, hypothetically, what if the charges are clearly fabricated? What if they're based on paranoid delusions rather than actual evidence? Montgomery chose his words carefully. Your Royal Highness, if charges are filed without substantial evidence, it could constitute an abuse of the legal system. However, proving that the accusations were made in bad faith would require its own investigation and legal proceedings. King Edmund rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the situation. Montgomery, Does the Crown have any authority to prevent charges from being filed if we believe they lack merit? Your Majesty, the Crown does have certain prerogatives in matters involving the royal family. However, exercising such authority would set a significant precedent and could be seen as interfering with the legal system. It would need to be done very carefully and with compelling justification. A knock at the study door interrupted their conversation. Lady Margaret entered, looking harried and anxious. Your Majesty, your Royal Highness, I apologize for the intrusion, but I bring urgent news. Queen Consort Cordelia has completed her formal complaint and has summoned Captain Rodriguez of the Royal Guard to her chambers. William shot to his feet. She's going to have Catherine arrested immediately. King Edmund's expression hardened with resolve. Montgomery, prepare an emergency royal decree temporarily suspending any arrests of royal family members pending my personal review. William, go to Catherine immediately and warn her of what's happening. She deserves to know what she's facing. And Cordelia? William asked. Leave Cordelia to me, the king replied firmly. It's time for a very direct conversation between stepmother and stepfather-in-law. As the group dispersed to handle their respective tasks, none of them noticed the figure lurking in the corridor outside the king's study. Palace footman James Hartwell had been passing by when he overheard fragments of the heated discussion within. James had always been ambitious and saw an opportunity to advance his position by selling information to the kingdom's most notorious tabloid journalist. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine was still in the nursery with Princess Sophia, helping her daughter build a castle out of colorful wooden blocks. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, creating dancing patterns of light on the floor, where Sophia played contentedly. Mama, will I live in a castle like this when I grow up? Sophia asked, carefully placing another block on top of her creation. Catherine smiled, gently tucking a strand of Sophia's golden hair behind her ear. Sweetheart, you already live in a castle. But what matters isn't where you live, it's how you treat the people around you and how you use your privileges to help others. Sophia nodded solemnly, taking her mother's words to heart as she always did. At 3 years old, she was already showing signs of the thoughtfulness and empathy that made Catherine so beloved by the public. A soft knock at the nursery door drew Catherine's attention. Come in, she called, expecting to see one of the nannies or perhaps a servant bringing afternoon tea. Instead, Prince William entered, his face tense with worry. Catherine immediately recognized his distressed expression and felt a flutter of concern in her chest. William, is everything all right? You look upset. William glanced at Sophia, who was absorbed in her block castle, then moved closer to Catherine and spoke in low tones. Catherine, we need to talk privately. Could you ask Nanny Elizabeth to stay with Sophia for a while? The urgency in his voice alarmed Catherine, but she maintained her composure for their daughter's sake. Of course. Sophia, darling, Mama needs to speak with Papa about some grown-up matters. Would you like Nanny Elizabeth to help you finish your castle? Sophia nodded enthusiastically as Nanny Elizabeth, a kind woman in her 50s who had cared for royal children for over 20 years, appeared as if summoned by magic. Catherine kissed her daughter's forehead and followed William to their private sitting room adjacent to the nursery. Once the door was closed, William took Catherine's hands in his touch conveying both comfort and gravity. Catherine, I need you to remain calm while I explain what's happening. Cordelia has convinced herself that you pose a threat to her position, and she's planning to take drastic action against you. Catherine's brow furrowed with confusion. What kind of action? William, you're frightening me. Cordelia is preparing to file formal charges of high treason against you. She believes your public appearances and speeches constitute an attempt to undermine her authority and incite rebellion against the crown. The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. She sank into a nearby chair, her face pale with shock. Treason? William, that's insane. I would never. How could she possibly believe such a thing? William knelt beside her chair, his hand still holding hers. My love, I know how absurd it sounds. Father, and I are working to prevent the charges from being filed, but I needed to warn you in case we're unsuccessful. Catherine's mind raced as she tried to process this information. What would happen if she succeeds in filing the charges? William's jaw tightened. You would be arrested by the Royal Guard and held pending investigation. You wouldn't be able to see Sophia or perform any royal duties until the matter is resolved. The mention of being separated from their daughter brought tears to Catherine's eyes. William, Sophia is so young. How will we explain this to her? How could Cordelia be so cruel as to put our family through this? I don't think Cordelia is considering the consequences of her actions, William replied. She's consumed by jealousy and paranoia. But, Catherine, I promise you that I will not let this happen. Whatever it takes, I will protect you and Sophia. Catherine stood and moved to the window, gazing out at the gardens where she had spent countless peaceful hours with her daughter. The normalcy of the scene below seemed surreal in light of what she had just learned. William, what did I do wrong? I've tried so hard to fulfill my duties with dignity and grace. I've never sought to overshadow anyone or gain favor at Cordelia's expense. You did nothing wrong, William said firmly, joining her at the window. Your only mistake was being naturally gifted at connecting with people. Cordelia sees that as a threat rather than an asset to the monarchy. Should we consider leaving? Catherine asked quietly. Perhaps if we went abroad for a while, until things calmed down. William shook his head. Running away would only fuel Cordelia's narrative that you're guilty of something. We need to face this head-on and prove her accusations are baseless. A commotion in the corridor outside drew their attention. Raised voices and the sound of heavy footsteps suggested that something significant was happening elsewhere in the palace. That might be Father confronting Cordelia, William said. He was quite angry when I left him. Indeed, King Edmund was at that moment striding through the palace corridors toward Cordelia's chambers, flanked by Lord Chancellor Montgomery and accompanied by a contingent of the Royal Guard. His face was set in an expression of stern determination that sent servants scurrying out of his path. Lady Margaret, who had been attempting to delay Cordelia's meeting with Captain Rodriguez, looked relieved when she saw the king approaching. Your Majesty, she said, curtsying deeply. Queen Consort Cordelia is in her private chambers with Captain Rodriguez. King Edmund nodded grimly. Margaret, please wait outside. What happens next may be difficult to witness. Without bothering to knock, King Edmund opened the door to Cordelia's chambers and entered with his entourage. Cordelia looked up in surprise from where she stood near her desk, a formal document in her hand. Captain Rodriguez, a stern-faced man in his 40s, stood at attention beside her. Edmund, Cordelia said, attempting to maintain her composure despite the obvious tension in the room. How unexpected. I was just conducting some royal business with Captain Rodriguez. King Edmund's voice was cold and controlled. Cordelia, I understand you're preparing to file charges of high treason against my daughter-in-law. I'm here to discuss this matter before any irreversible actions are taken. Cordelia's chin lifted defiantly. Edmund, as queen consort, I have both the right and the duty to protect the crown from those who would undermine it. Princess Catherine's actions constitute a clear threat to the stability of the monarchy. What action specifically? King Edmund demanded. What evidence do you have of treasonous behavior? Cordelia gestured to the stack of newspapers on her desk. Look at these headlines, Edmund. Look at how the press portrays her versus how they portray me. She's systematically working to turn the people against me. Being popular with the press and the public is not a crime, Cordelia. If it were, half the royal family would be in prison. Cordelia's voice rose with frustration. You don't understand, Edmund. She's using her popularity as a weapon against me. Every speech she gives, every appearance she makes, is calculated to make me look inadequate by comparison. Lord Chancellor Montgomery stepped forward. Your Majesty, if I may interject, the accusations being made would require substantial evidence of actual treasonous activity. Public popularity and media coverage do not constitute grounds for treason charges. Captain Rodriguez, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Your Majesty, I must confess that I have concerns about the evidence presented to me. The allegations seem to be based largely on interpretation and assumption rather than concrete proof of wrongdoing. Cordelia whirled to face the captain, her eyes blazing with anger. "Captain Rodriguez, I am ordering you to arrest Princess Catherine immediately. That is not a request." Before Rodriguez could respond, King Edmund stepped between them. "Captain Rodriguez, as your king, I am countermanding that order. You will take no action against Princess Catherine until this matter has been thoroughly reviewed through proper channels." The room fell silent as the weight of the king's words settled over everyone present. Cordelia stared at Edmund in shock, her face flushing with humiliation and rage. "Edmund, how dare you undermine my authority in front of palace staff? I am the queen consort of this kingdom." "And I am the king," Edmund replied firmly. "Cordelia, your emotions have clouded your judgment to a dangerous degree. These accusations against Catherine are baseless and potentially damaging to the entire royal family." Cordelia's composure finally cracked completely. "So you're taking her side? Just like everyone else in this palace. You're choosing the precious princess over me." The pain and insecurity underlying her anger were evident in her voice, and for a moment, King Edmund's expression softened with sympathy. "Cordelia, this isn't about choosing sides. This is about preventing a catastrophic mistake that could damage the monarchy irreparably. Catherine is not your enemy, and treating her as one will only create the very problems you claim to be trying to prevent." "Edmund, you cannot do this to me," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I will not be humiliated and dismissed like some hysterical woman. I am the queen consort, and my concerns about Princess Catherine are legitimate." King Edmund stepped closer to his wife, his expression a mixture of firmness and compassion. "Cordelia, I'm not dismissing your concerns, but the solution you're proposing is extreme and dangerous. Filing false charges of treason against Catherine would not only be unjust, but could destabilize the entire kingdom." "False?" Cordelia's voice rose again. "How can you call them false when you haven't even investigated? You're so blinded by that woman's charm that you refuse to see what's right in front of you." Lord Chancellor Montgomery cleared his throat diplomatically. "Your Majesty, perhaps we could discuss this matter in a more private setting. These are internal family matters that may be best resolved without the presence of palace staff." King Edmund nodded, recognizing the wisdom in Montgomery's suggestion. "Captain Rodriguez, you're dismissed. Please forget what you've witnessed here today. Lady Margaret, please ensure that no word of this discussion leaves this room." Both Captain Rodriguez and Lady Margaret bowed respectfully and exited the chambers, leaving only the royal family and the Lord Chancellor to continue their heated discussion. As soon as the door closed, Cordelia's composure completely shattered. She sank into her ornate armchair, the treason document falling from her hands to the floor. Tears began streaming down her face as months of pent-up frustration and insecurity finally overwhelmed her. "Edmund, you don't understand what it's like," she sobbed. "Every day, I wake up knowing that I'm being compared to her. Every public appearance, every charity event, every time I speak to the press, all they want to know is why I'm not more like Princess Catherine." King Edmund's expression softened as he witnessed his wife's vulnerability. He moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her trembling hands in his. "Cordelia, my dear, you're trying to compete in a game that doesn't exist. Catherine isn't your rival. She's part of our family. But she makes me look foolish," Cordelia whispered. "She's naturally graceful and charming, and everything I try to do feels forced and artificial by comparison. The people love her, and they barely tolerate me." Lord Chancellor Montgomery, sensing that this was becoming an intensely personal conversation, discreetly moved toward the window to give the royal couple some privacy while remaining available if needed. King Edmund gently lifted Cordelia's chin so she was looking at him. "My love, you became queen consort not because you needed to be perfect, but because I fell in love with who you are. Your passion, your determination, your fierce loyalty, these are the qualities that make you special." Then, Why doesn't anyone else see those qualities? Cordelia asked, her voice breaking. Why do the newspapers constantly portray me as cold and calculating while she's described as warm and compassionate? Because the press thrives on creating narratives and drama, Edmund replied gently. They've cast you and Catherine in opposing roles because conflict sells newspapers. But their narratives don't define who you are or determine your worth as a person or as a queen. Cordelia wiped her tears with a delicate handkerchief, trying to regain some semblance of her dignity. Edmund, I know my accusations against Catherine seem extreme, but I truly believe she was working against me. Every smile for the cameras, every perfectly timed charitable gesture, it all felt so calculated and manipulative. Cordelia, what you've interpreted as calculation is simply Catherine's natural way of connecting with people. She's not performing. She's being herself. And that authenticity is what resonates with the public. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, Prince William was pacing anxiously in his study while Princess Catherine sat in a nearby chair, still trying to process the shocking news of Cordelia's accusations. The room was filled with late afternoon sunlight that cast long shadows across the Persian carpets and mahogany furniture. William, I keep trying to understand how Cordelia could believe I'm capable of treason, Catherine said quietly. Have I been so blind to her feelings that I inadvertently hurt her? William stopped pacing and turned to face his wife. Catherine, you have always been kind and respectful to Cordelia. If she's feeling threatened by your success, that's a reflection of her own insecurities, not anything you've done wrong. But perhaps I could have been more sensitive to her position, Catherine continued. Coming into the family as the younger generation, taking on prominent public roles, maybe I should have been more deferential. No, William said firmly. You should never diminish yourself to make someone else feel more secure. Cordelia needs to learn to find confidence in her own abilities rather than trying to tear down others. A knock at the study door interrupted their conversation. Lord Harrison entered with a concerned expression. Your Royal Highness, I apologize for the interruption, but I've just received word from an unusual source. Palace footman James Hartwell has contacted me with what he claims is urgent information about the current family situation. William frowned. James Hartwell? I'm not familiar with that name. He's a junior footman who works primarily in the administrative wings, Your Highness. He claims to have overheard conversations about serious charges being filed against Princess Catherine. Catherine felt her blood run cold. William, if palace staff are already talking about this, it's only a matter of time before the press finds out. William's jaw tightened with anger. Bring Hartwell here immediately, Lord Harrison. I want to know exactly what he's heard and who else he's spoken to. Within minutes, James Hartwell was escorted into the study. He was a thin young man in his early 20s with shifty eyes and an overly eager demeanor. His nervousness was palpable as he stood before Prince William and Princess Catherine. Your Royal Highness, he said, bowing awkwardly. I hope I'm doing the right thing by coming forward with this information. What exactly did you overhear, Hartwell? William asked sternly. Well, sir, I was passing by His Majesty's study earlier today when I heard raised voices. I couldn't help but catch fragments of the conversation about treason charges and arrests. Hartwell's eyes darted between William and Catherine nervously. Catherine leaned forward in her chair. Hartwell, have you spoken to anyone else about what you heard? Hartwell hesitated for just a moment too long. No, Your Royal Highness. I came directly to Lord Harrison because I thought you should know that people were talking about your situation. William's eyes narrowed. You hesitated before answering Princess Catherine's question. I ask you again, have you spoken to anyone outside the palace about this matter? The young footman's face flushed red. Well, sir, I may have mentioned it to a friend who works for one of the newspapers. But I only told him because I was worried about Your Royal Highness and thought someone should know if there was a conspiracy against her. William's face darkened with fury. Which newspaper? Hartwell. The Royal Chronicle, sir. My friend Jeremy works in their newsroom. But I only gave him the basic facts. I didn't provide any details or confidential information. Catherine felt sick to her stomach. The Royal Chronicle was the kingdom's most sensationalistic tabloid, known for their aggressive pursuit of royal scandals and their willingness to print rumors as fact. Hartwell, you've potentially compromised the safety and privacy of the entire royal family, William said, his voice dangerously quiet. Did it occur to you that spreading unverified rumors about treason charges could cause panic and endanger the stability of the kingdom? The footman's face went pale as the gravity of his actions began to sink in. Your Royal Highness, I never intended to cause harm. I thought I was helping. You were helping yourself to what you saw as an opportunity to profit from inside information, William accused. How much did the Royal Chronicle pay you for your story? Hartwell's silence was answer enough. William turned to Lord Harrison. Contact palace security immediately. I want Hartwell detained until we can determine the full extent of his communications with the press. And get me Jeremy Morrison at the Royal Chronicle on the phone immediately. As Lord Harrison escorted the disgraced footman from the study, Catherine turned to her husband with despair in her eyes. William, this changes everything. If the Royal Chronicle publishes this story before we can resolve the situation with Cordelia, the damage will be irreversible. William was already reaching for his phone. I'm calling Father immediately. He needs to know that our private family crisis is about to become a public spectacle. Back in Cordelia's chambers, King Edmund was still trying to comfort his distraught wife when his private phone rang. He glanced at the caller identification and saw William's name. Excuse me, my dear, he said to Cordelia before answering. William, I hope you're calling with good news. Father, I'm afraid the situation has just become much more complicated. William's voice was tense through the phone speaker. We have a press leak. The Royal Chronicle will likely be running a story about Cordelia's treason accusations within hours. King Edmund felt his stomach drop. How did this happen? A palace footman overheard our earlier conversation and sold the information to his contact at the newspaper. Father, once this story breaks, the entire kingdom will be watching our every move. Cordelia had been listening to the conversation, and the news hit her like a physical blow. Oh God, Edmund, what have I done? I never wanted this to become public. King Edmund covered the phone's mouthpiece and spoke to his wife. Cordelia, we can still control the situation, but we need to act quickly and decisively. He returned to his phone conversation with William. Son, we need to convene an emergency family meeting immediately. Gather Catherine and meet us in the blue drawing room in 20 minutes. We're going to resolve this crisis tonight, one way or another. As King Edmund ended the call, Lord Chancellor Montgomery approached from his position by the window. Your Majesty, if I may suggest, we should also contact the palace's public relations team. If the story is going to break, we need to be prepared with an official response. Agreed, King Edmund replied. Montgomery, please contact Director Sarah Bennett and have her meet us in the blue drawing room as well. We're going to need her expertise in crisis management. Cordelia stood shakily, her earlier defiance replaced by fear and regret. Edmund, the people are going to think I'm a monster for accusing Catherine of treason. My reputation will never recover from this. King Edmund took her hands gently. Cordelia, your reputation can recover from almost anything except the failure to take responsibility for your actions. Tonight, you have the opportunity to show the kingdom your true character. What do you mean? Cordelia asked. You can publicly admit that your accusations were based on misunderstanding and personal insecurity rather than actual evidence of wrongdoing. You can apologize to Catherine and the kingdom for allowing your emotions to cloud your judgment. Cordelia's eyes widened with fear. Edmund, that would be professional suicide. Admitting I was wrong about something this serious would make me look unfit for my position. Cordelia, filing false treason charges would make you look unfit for your position. King Edmund replied firmly. Taking responsibility for your mistake and making amends shows strength and maturity. As they prepared to leave for the blue drawing room, neither Cordelia nor King Edmund noticed the small recording device hidden behind one of the ornate flower arrangements in the chamber. James Hartwell had been more thorough in his espionage than anyone realized, and his contact at the Royal Chronicle would soon have audio evidence of the entire royal family crisis. The next hour would determine not only the fate of Princess Catherine, but the future of the entire monarchy. As staff members hurried through the palace corridors preparing for the emergency meeting, the weight of impending scandal hung heavy in the air like an approaching storm. #Royal Drama. Part for the Blue Drawing Room at Ravencrest Palace had witnessed countless historic moments throughout the centuries, but the atmosphere this evening was particularly charged with tension and uncertainty. The elegant chamber, with its azure silk wall coverings and priceless Renaissance paintings, provided a stark contrast to the modern crisis unfolding within its walls. King Edmund sat at the head of the polished mahogany conference table, his usual calm demeanor masking the turmoil he felt inside. To his right sat Queen Consort Cordelia, her earlier tears replaced by a mask of rigid composure as she prepared to face the family she had accused of conspiracy. Across from them, Prince William held Princess Catherine's hand protectively, his jaw set with determination to defend his wife at all costs. Lord Chancellor Montgomery occupied a chair near the window, his legal documents spread before him like weapons in an upcoming battle. Beside him sat Director Sarah Bennet, the palace's head of public relations, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s whose reputation for crisis management had saved the royal family from scandal more than once. "Thank you all for gathering on such short notice," King Edmund began, his voice carrying the weight of authority developed over decades of leadership. "Before we discuss our response to the media situation, I believe we need to address the underlying family issues that brought us to this point." Cordelia shifted uncomfortably in her chair, acutely aware that all eyes were upon her. The formal charges document lay on the table before her, a tangible reminder of how close she had come to irrevocably damaging her family and her kingdom. "Your Majesty," Director Bennet interjected professionally. "Before we begin internal discussions, I need to inform everyone of the current media situation. The Royal Chronicle has indeed been contacted about potential treason charges against Princess Catherine. Their editor, Marcus Thornfield, called my office an hour ago, seeking official comment." Princess Catherine felt her heart sink. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that the palace does not comment on unsubstantiated rumors," Bennet replied. "However, he indicated that they have multiple sources and plan to run the story in tomorrow's morning edition regardless of our response." Prince William's face darkened. "Multiple sources? How is that possible when only a handful of people knew about this situation?" Bennet consulted her notes. "According to Thornfield, they have at least 2 palace employees who have provided information, plus what he described as audio evidence of conversations between royal family members." The room fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. King Edmund's expression shifted from concern to barely controlled anger. "Audio evidence," he said quietly. "That suggests someone has been recording private conversations within the palace. This is not merely a breach of confidentiality. It's an act of espionage against the crown." Lord Chancellor Montgomery looked up from his documents. "Your Majesty, if palace employees have been conducting unauthorized surveillance of royal family members, that constitutes multiple serious crimes, including violation of the Official Secrets Act and potentially treason itself." Cordelia spoke for the first time since the meeting began, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is my fault. If I hadn't allowed my emotions to drive me to such desperate measures, none of this would have happened." Catherine looked across the table at her accuser, seeing not an enemy, but a fellow woman struggling with insecurity and fear. Despite everything Cordelia had put her through, Catherine felt a surge of compassion for the older woman's obvious distress. "Cordelia," Catherine said gently, "we all make mistakes when we're feeling threatened or overwhelmed. What matters now is how we move forward together." William squeezed his wife's hand, proud of her grace under pressure, but still concerned about her well-being. "Catherine, you're being remarkably generous considering that you're facing false charges of treason." "They're not false," Cordelia said suddenly, causing everyone to look at her in confusion. "I mean, the charges themselves are false, but my feelings that led to them were real." "Catherine," I owe you an explanation and an apology. King Edmund nodded encouragingly to his wife. Go on, Cordelia. Cordelia took a deep breath, gathering her courage. Catherine, from the moment you joined this family, you've been everything I feared I could never be. You're naturally elegant where I feel awkward, effortlessly charming where I struggle to connect with people, and genuinely beloved by the public where I feel merely tolerated. She paused, her voice trembling slightly. Instead of learning from your example or asking for your help, I allowed jealousy and insecurity to poison my thoughts. I convinced myself that your success was somehow a deliberate attack on my position and dignity. Catherine felt tears welling in her eyes as she listened to Cordelia's heartfelt confession. Cordelia, I had no idea you were feeling this way. I never intended to overshadow you or make you feel inadequate. I know that now, Cordelia replied. Looking back at your behavior over the past months, I can see that you've always been respectful and supportive. Every slight I imagined, every conspiracy I believed I detected, they were all products of my own paranoid thinking. Prince William, who had spent months watching his wife suffer under Cordelia's increasingly hostile behavior, found himself moved by the older woman's genuine remorse. Cordelia, it takes courage to admit when we've been wrong, especially about something this serious. Director Bennett, who had been listening to the family discussion while monitoring her phone for press developments, looked up with concern. I hate to interrupt this important conversation, but we have a new development. The Royal Chronicle just posted a preliminary story on their website with the headline, Palace in Crisis. Treason charges threaten royal family. She read from her phone screen. Sources close to the royal family report that Queen Consort Cordelia has filed formal charges of high treason against Princess Catherine, accusing the popular royal of plotting to undermine the crown. Audio recordings allegedly capture heated arguments between family members as King Edmund attempts to protect his daughter-in-law from prosecution. The room erupted in voices as everyone began speaking at once. King Edmund raised his hand for silence, his expression grim with determination. Bennett, how long do we have before this story reaches the major news outlets? Hours at most, Your Majesty. The Royal Chronicle stories typically get picked up by other media within 2 to 4 hours of publication. King Edmund turned to Montgomery. What are our legal options for containing the situation? Your Majesty, we could seek an injunction against further publication, but that would likely draw even more attention to the story. Our best option may be to get ahead of the narrative with a controlled disclosure. Cordelia suddenly stood, her decision crystallizing in her mind. No, we're going to tell the truth. Everyone looked at her with surprise. William was the first to speak. Cordelia, what do you mean? I mean that I'm going to hold a press conference and publicly admit that my accusations against Catherine were unfounded and based on my own personal insecurities rather than any evidence of wrongdoing. Bennett looked skeptical. Your Majesty, that's a very risky strategy. Admitting error on such a serious matter could severely damage your credibility and position. My credibility is already damaged, Cordelia replied firmly. At least this way, I can control the narrative and protect Catherine from further harm. King Edmund studied his wife's determined expression. Cordelia, are you certain about this course of action? Once you make such a public admission, there's no taking it back. Edmund, for months I've been so focused on protecting my image and position that I lost sight of what truly matters. Catherine doesn't deserve to have her reputation destroyed because of my personal failings. Catherine rose from her chair and walked around the table to stand beside Cordelia. If you're going to face the press, you won't do it alone. I'll stand with you and publicly accept your apology. Together, we can show the kingdom that even royal families can work through their differences with honesty and grace. Prince William looked at his wife with a mixture of admiration and concern. Catherine, you don't have to do that. You're the victim in this situation. William, sometimes the greatest strength comes from choosing forgiveness over revenge, Catherine replied. If Cordelia and I can reconcile publicly, it might actually strengthen the monarchy rather than damage it. Bennett was frantically taking notes as the conversation developed. If we're going to attempt this strategy, we need to move quickly. I recommend scheduling the press conference for tomorrow morning before the story has time to spread further. Lord Chancellor Montgomery cleared his throat. Before any public statements are made, we need to address the matter of the recording devices and the compromised palace security. Your Majesty, I strongly recommend a full investigation of all palace staff who had access to the areas where these conversations took place. King Edmund nodded grimly. Agreed. Captain Rodriguez should lead a security sweep of the entire palace. Anyone found to have participated in unauthorized surveillance will face the full consequences of their actions. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Captain Rodriguez appeared at the drawing room door. Your Majesty, I apologize for the interruption, but we've discovered additional recording equipment in Queen Consort Cordelia's chambers. We've also identified a second palace employee who appears to have been involved in the surveillance operation. Who? King Edmund demanded. Lady Margaret's assistant, Rebecca Morrison. She's been feeding information to her brother Jeremy Morrison at the Royal Chronicle for several months. Cordelia gasped. Rebecca has been in my private chambers almost daily. She's heard countless personal conversations between Edmund and me. Your Majesty, Rodriguez continued, we believe this has been a coordinated effort to gather compromising information about the royal family for financial gain. The amount of material they've collected could be substantial. The implications of this revelation were staggering. If palace employees have been systematically recording private conversations for months, virtually every aspect of the royal family's personal lives could have been compromised. Director Bennett looked up from her phone with alarm. Your Majesty, I'm receiving reports that additional stories are being prepared for publication. The Royal Chronicle appears to have enough material for a week-long series of exposés. King Edmund stood, his expression hardening with resolve. Then, we change our strategy entirely. Instead of a simple press conference about Cordelia's accusations, we're going to expose the entire surveillance operation and turn this into a story about palace security breaches and employee betrayal. Father, William said thoughtfully, that might actually work in our favor. The public is generally sympathetic to victims of espionage and betrayal. Catherine nodded in agreement. And it shifts the focus from family drama to criminal activity, which is much easier for the public to understand and condemn. Bennett was already drafting press statements in her head. We could position the royal family as victims of a criminal conspiracy while simultaneously demonstrating your ability to work together to address the crisis. Cordelia took King Edmund's hand, drawing strength from his support. Edmund, I'm prepared to face whatever consequences come from my actions, but I won't let innocent people suffer for my mistakes. We face this together, Edmund replied firmly. As a family and as a team. Over the next several hours, the palace became a hive of activity as staff members prepared for the unprecedented press conference that would determine the monarchy's future. Security teams swept the building for additional recording devices, while legal experts prepared criminal charges against the palace employees involved in the surveillance operation. In the early morning hours as dawn broke over the kingdom, King Edmund, Queen Consort Cordelia, Prince William, and Princess Catherine stood together in the palace's main courtyard facing a crowd of journalists and cameras. The sight of the entire royal family presenting a united front sent a powerful message before anyone had spoken a word. King Edmund stepped forward to the microphone, his voice carrying the authority and dignity that had defined his reign. Citizens of our kingdom and members of the press, we gather this morning to address recent events that have affected our royal family and to expose criminal activities that have threatened our security and privacy. As he began to speak, the sun fully emerged from behind the palace walls, casting the royal family in golden morning light, a symbolic new beginning after the darkest night of crisis in recent royal history. The story that emerged over the following days would indeed change the monarchy, but not in the way anyone had expected. Rather than destroying the royal family, the crisis ultimately brought them closer together and demonstrated to the kingdom that even those in positions of power were capable of growth, forgiveness, and redemption. Princess Catherine's grace under pressure and willingness to forgive only increased her popularity with the public, while Queen Consort Cordelia's honest admission of her mistakes and commitment to personal growth earned her a new kind of respect from the people she served. The criminal conspiracy that had threatened to destroy the royal family ultimately served to strengthen it, proving that truth and unity could overcome even the most carefully orchestrated attempts at manipulation and betrayal.